Although I don't mandate that 100%, I do try to follow that same technique so that through that oral, which is never just an hour, my oral portion of a flight review is a minimum of 2 hours. Sometimes it goes on 3. I'll typically assign some kind of a flight planning task, and through that then find out what kind of risk management tools does this pilot use in their everyday flying. What do they think about? Do they consider it or not? I'll have a power failure, a simulated power failure, to a full stop landing. So many instructors get to 500 feet AGL and say, well, great, that's done. You know, it's the last 500 feet where they're really going to screw up. They might do perfect circle around until they're 500 feet AGL, and this is now where they end up really blowing it. And so I insist on that. And if they haven't done it well, we'll go back and do it again. And I'll give them tips. I'm not going to sit there like an examiner in a flight review. I'm there to instruct and to teach, and especially with all the vagaries, for lack of another word, that we might find in EAB aircraft. As an instructor, if you really have the integrity, if you don't have experience with that airplane, or at least experience with airplanes of that type or similar performance characteristics, you really have no business conducting a flight review because you don't know anything. Instead, if we go to them and say, you know, what you're doing has a very high element of danger. You have the ability to do this if you will allow me to help you do that. Understand that it's dangerous and allow me to show you those areas where it is dangerous and give you the tools to make you safer in it. If we just tell them you can't do it, they're going to say, yes, I can.
But sometimes personalities don't allow somebody, once they're rattled or once they're really scared, to appropriately think their way through it. And if you're not ready as the flight instructor to go ahead and take those controls, you may find yourself in a very dangerous situation. So sometimes we get into flight review situations where the owner brings us an aircraft, and we assume that they're very proficient in that aircraft. Maybe it's something we haven't flown a lot. Maybe we've got 10 or 15 hours in it. And we kind of get to a point where we assume they're going to know how to do this well. Perhaps they're even still within their flight review time period, so they're current to fly it, but are
pilots give up flying altogether. Or, number 4, believe it or not, they experience anxiety over communicating with air traffic control. And I've known pilots who are so reluctant to ask ATC for a Class B clearance that they will inconveniently fly over, under, and or around. Then again, you should be equally as interested in the type of flying your student isn't doing. For instance, if he's using the airplane for extensive cross-country trips and does so safely, in other words, he doesn't have the habit of starring in NTSB reports, if you understand what I'm saying, then I'm going to assume that he has some proficiency in this area. If, however, I don't see examples of pattern work or low-speed maneuvering, then I'm also going to assume that he is not proficient in that area. So perhaps I'll spend some time refreshing his or her skills in the area of slow flight, stall recognition, and recovery. Sometimes we assume that the flying portion of the review is more important than the ground review portion, but I'd like to argue that that's not necessarily the case. Some of the very best lessons I've ever learned in a physical art came with the philosophical discussion that occurred after the hands-on training ended. Our minds tend to be more receptive to suggestions after we've felt the good feelings associated with a successful accomplishment, such as performing well on the flight review. Now, you've experienced this with your primary students when they return from successfully passing a check ride and are all excited about the ride, and they feel really, really good about it. And you see, Bond's troubles stemmed from his doubts about whether or not he was actually fighting for the cause of justice and doing good for humanity. He was so disturbed by this dilemma that he actually considered quitting MI6 until his French colleague Mathis intervened. Now, here's what Mathis said to Bond. When you get back to London, you will find that there are other Les Sheriffs, that's the bad guy in Casino Royale, seeking to destroy you and your friends and your country. And now that you have seen a really evil man, you will know how evil they can be, and you will go after them to destroy them in order to protect yourself and the people you love. He goes on to say, surround yourself with human beings, my dear James. They are easier to fight for than principles. Mathis instructs Bond that, to do his job well, he has to make it personal. This is how to protect the people he cares for, rather than concern himself with whether or not he's on the side of right or wrong. And therein lies the lesson for every pilot.